by pretty fast. Contrary to popular belief, I must say this is my favorite chapter, being the fact that most of the argument, well, a good portion of the argument, let's say, is proven in this area. This is an area where a lot of facts are brought to the forefront to give you a better understanding of the claim that I'm making, that there is a lunar Sabbath that is Jehovah's real Sabbath, and you'll get to see it here. Contrary to popular belief, our Heavenly Father, the Almighty, is perfect and consistent. He does not change. Malachi 3:6 states, "For I am Jehovah, I shall not change, and you, O sons of Yaakov, shall not come to an end." Hebrews 13:8 states, Yeshua Messiah is the same yesterday and today and forever. James 1:17 states, "Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no change nor shadow of turning." Fact: Julius Caesar, the first Roman emperor, was responsible for the fundamental reform of the calendar, which rendered the length of months we use today. Named after himself, he introduced the Julian calendar in 46 BC. A Roman emperor named Constantine the Great, or not so great, was determined to suppress and abandon the Hebraic foundation of the scriptures and implemented a self-imposed reconstruction of when and how the Sabbath was to be observed. Sunday was dedicated as a day to worship the Roman sun god Mithra. In the 4th century AD, Constantine legislated that the Christian Sabbath would be observed on Sunday opposed to Saturday. This decree was also enforced into Western civilization, referred to as the Blue Laws. The Blue Laws were drafted by a sect of zealous Puritans in 1624 in the American colony of New Haven. These laws were created to regulate personal and professional conduct concerning the Sabbath, or concerning Sunday, the Christian Sabbath. Here's where it gets very interesting. The Greek and Roman calendars were initially lunar and proclaimed by the sighting of the new moon. In order to correct for its supposed inaccuracy, the Romans created an 8-day week to their calendar, lettering their days from A to H. The word calendar derived from the Latin root word calere, which means to proclaim, thereby naming the first day of the lunar month calends, and the 13th of the month Ides. Ides was a term to indicate the full moon or the middle of the month. However, adjustments were made to the calendar that moved it from the 13th to the 15th, which is much more accurate, being that the moon is completely full between the 14th and 15th of every lunar month. As a modification to the Julian calendar, in 1582, Pope Gregory XIII introduced what we know and observe today as the Gregorian calendar in an attempt to align the calendar with the solar year. Under this reform, the beginning of the year was changed from March, which was much more accurate and lines up with the lunar year, to January. Here's some food for thought. Wouldn't it make more sense for the beginning of the year to start around March, April, when vegetation and plant life springs forth, instead of in January in the middle of winter when they are either dormant or dead? Here's a fact from Duncan Steele, or Dr. Duncan Steele. In his book, he states, if one were to divide the lunar month of 29.53 days by 4, the nearest integer to the result is 7. Dr. Steele also states that a distinct Babylonian word was Sebutu, meaning the 7th. And each month taken to begin at new moon, the 7th day was a special day when rites of purification and expiation or atonements were made or performed. These next 4 slides will reveal some very compelling information concerning my argument, which is the Jehovah's true Sabbath is the lunar Sabbath, which is on the 7th, the 14th, the 21st, and the 28th. Here we see an excerpt from the Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics on page 890 concerning the Babylonian Sabbath. Nanaru the moon has caused to shine, ruling the night. He set him then as a creature of the night to make known the days, i.e., the festivals. Monthly unfailing, he provided him with a tiara. At the beginning of the month, then, appearing in the land, the horns shine forth to make known the seasons. On the seventh day, the tiara, perfecting a Sabbath, or Sabbatu, shalt thou then encounter mid-monthly. Like the Hebrews, the Babylonian culture is an ancient Semitic culture. This is to illustrate that the ancient civilization's calendars were lunar-based, especially when it came to the Sabbath. Under festivals and fast, Hebrew festivals and fast, rather, on page 863, I find this very interesting because I think I could just, at this point, just drop the microphone and walk away once I make this point. However, I will continue to prove my point through further scripture and historical data. It states here, since the Sabbatu is described in the cuneiform inscriptions as a day of rest for the soul, say he argues for a Babylonian origin and compares it with the observance of the 7th, 14th, 21st, 28th days as days on which it was unlawful to do certain kinds of work. Now, I said Sabbatu, it's a typo here. You see Sabalu, but there must have been some type of a typo when transforming over the language of how it was written. So forgive me for that. The encyclopedia goes on, and still under festivals and fasts, it states, it seems likely that the original purpose of the Sabbath was to consecrate every phase of the moon. It may have been derived in the first instance from some form of moon worship. If so, the purpose was lost sight of when, if not before, a conventional week of 7 days was substituted for the lunar phase. Under the Hebrew calendar, which is in the Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics, page 108, it states, the month was a moon period or lunation. The week comprised very nearly a quarter of a lunation. And the day was, of course, the period of the Earth's rotation on its axis. And what it's stating here is that a week, a lunar month rather, comprised of or consisted of 4 periods or 4 weeks or 4 lunations. Let's continue. According to the English dictionary, the words moon and month are synonymous and interchangeable. And it states moon, the natural satellite of the earth, visible chiefly at night by reflected light from the sun. And we will see this in much more detail later on in the teaching. The moon, figuratively, anything that one could desire. Okay, well, that doesn't really pertain to us. But as we go down to the highlighted area, a moon, especially a lunar month, and they use this in old saying stating many moons had passed since he bought a prospective investor home. So we see moon as showing that it is a lunar month. And under here, further down, where it's highlighted in Latin is menses. In Greek, it's menth or month, to measure, the moon being used to measure time. What I also find interesting is in Hebrew, moon and month, or chodesh, are synonymous in Hebrew as well. Strong's number 2320, meaning the new moon, month, monthly, the first day of the month, the lunar month. Here are some questions to ask yourself. Some may be taken as rhetorical, but nonetheless, these are questions you should ask yourself. If the Sabbath was the first recorded feast that Jehovah observed long before Rome became a nation, then why would it be determined and governed by a man-made pagan calendar? Think about it. Sunday, the first day of the week. Its English name and German name is Sonntag, are derived from the Latin root word das solis, or sun's day. The name of a pagan Roman holiday, Das Solis, unto Mithra. This worship day was unto the Roman god Mithra. Many people do not know that. Monday, the second day of the week, derived from the Anglo-Saxon Monadag, which means the moon's day. Its Latin equivalent is Das Lunae, or day of the moon. For the Anglo-Saxons, the second day was sacred to the goddess of the moon. In German, the second day is Montag, in French, Lundi, and Italian, Lunedì. Tuesday, the third day of the week, named for the Norse god of war, Tiu, or Tyr, the son of Odin or Woden. It is called Tisdag in Sweden or Tursdag in Denmark. The Romans honored their god of war, Mars, by naming the third day for him Dies Mars. And in France, the day is Mardi, or I guess they refer to this as a Mardi Gras. You heard of, they were called Fat Tuesday, Mardi Gras, Gras meaning large, Mardi meaning Tuesday, or the after their god. In Italy, Martedì, and in Spain, Martis. In Germany, it is Dienstag, originally meaning Assembly Day. So forgive me again if I butcher some of these names. A lot of these are foreign. What I also find interesting is that 9/11, September 11, 2001, took place on this day, on a Tuesday. Again, let me reiterate the fact of the one of the earlier slides where I stated, or the word stated rather, that we are not to mention the name of other gods out of our mouth, or do not let it be heard on our lips. However, I am sure the Almighty Jehovah will forgive me for to allow this teaching so I can demonstrate to you the meaning of these pagan days in which we hold dear to us, or which we observe on a daily basis, or even say out of our mouth. Wednesday, the fourth day of the week, named to honor Odin or Woden, chief god of the Norse mythology. In Sweden and Denmark, the day is Onsdag, from its Norse original. The Romans honored their god Mercury by naming the fourth day for him. In Latin is Dies Mercuri. Languages of Latin origin retain the root. French, mercredi, Spanish, miércoles, and Italian, mercoledì. Thursday, the fifth day of the week, named for Thor. A lot of people saw growing up in the 80s and the 90s. I myself saw I guess it's part of the superhero, one of the superheroes, Thor, which was a cartoon and is actually a pagan deity, and a lot of us were ignorant to the fact. However, Thor, Norse god of thunder. In Danish and Swedish languages of Norse origin, the day is called Torsday. In the Roman calendar, fifth day was called in Latin Dies Jovis, meaning Jove's day, for Jove or Jupiter, the god of thunder and rain, the most important deity in Roman mythology. Languages of Latin derivation retain the root. French, Judy, Spanish, El Jueves, Italian, Giovetti. In German, it's Donnerstag, Thunder's Day. Friday, Anglo-Saxon Frigisday, from the Old High German Freya, or goddess, Old English Dag, day. English name of the sixth day of the week. The day was held sacred to Venus, the goddess of love, by the Romans, who called it Dies Veneris, or Day of Venus. In the Romance languages, the name of the day is derived from the Latin, as in the French, Vendredi, the Italian Vernidi or Venerdi, and the Spanish Viernes. German peoples held the day sacred to the Norse goddess of love, Frigg, or Frigga. Again, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. The German languages, like English, use variations of the Old High German Freitag, a day of Frigga, to designate the day. Saturday, the seventh day of the week, not Jehovah's seventh day. Nonetheless, it's the seventh day of the pagan or the Gregorian week, named in honor of the Roman god Saturn. In Latin, Saturday was called Dies Saturni. It was called Saturdag by the Anglo-Saxons. Here's another question to think about. If the Gregorian calendar, what we use now, was originally introduced and instituted in 1582 by Pope Gregory XIII, and the preceding Julian calendar was instituted by Julius Caesar in 46 BC, what was the governing calendar for the people of Jehovah to observe his Sabbaths and feasts before then? What is the common thread for the change in our calendar? Julius Caesar introduced the Julian calendar in 46 BC. Constantine instituted Sunday worship in the 4th century AD. Pope Gregory XIII introduced the Gregorian calendar in 1582. Constantine's enforcement of Sunday worship led to the adoption of the blue laws here in America. Rome. So, what if Pope Francis decided to institute a change in the Gregorian calendar to reflect a 9-day week opposed to our current 7-day week, and decided that the week should start on Saturday instead of ending on Saturday and added 2 more days to the week? Now, I know I'm dating this by saying Pope Francis, but nonetheless, during the time of this recording, he is the current Pope. Of course, Saturday will no longer be the Sabbath. Then what? After all, the Pope does have the authority to change when we are to worship Jehovah's appointed feast, especially the Sabbath, doesn't he? No. So, why would the Almighty allow this confusion or the loss of his reckoning of time? Why have we been stuck in this pattern of believing falsehood? And Proverbs 28:2 explains why. Because of transgression of a land, many are its rulers, but by a man of understanding and knowledge, right is maintained. In Ezekiel 20:22 through 25 reads, Nevertheless, I withdrew mine hand and wrought for my name's sake, that it should not be polluted in the sight of the heathen, in whose sight I brought them forth. I lifted up my hand unto them also in the wilderness, that I would scatter them among the heathen and disperse them throughout the countries, because they had not executed my judgments, but had despised my statutes, and had polluted my Sabbaths. And their eyes were after their fathers' idols. Wherefore I gave them also statutes that were not good, and judgment whereby they should not live. Sounds familiar? 2 Thessalonians 2:9 through 12 states, The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all power and signs and wonders of falsehood, and with all deceit of unrighteousness in those perishing, because they did not receive the love of the truth in order for them to be saved. And for this reason Elohim sends them a working of delusion, for them to believe the falsehood, in order that all should be judged, who did not believe the truth, but have delighted in the unrighteousness. You see, people of Jehovah, when we do not receive Jehovah's truth, when we do not have a love for it, he sends us workings of delusion so we can believe and even enjoy a lie. It is those who have the heart for him, those who have a heart for truth that will seek him. They will find Jehovah. Jehovah is not interested in casting his pearls before swine. He's not interested in showing the goodness of who he is to those who do not deserve it, or those who are not worthy of receiving it, or who have no appreciation for it. So, what determines the Sabbath? The moon. In Genesis 1:14 through 16, it states, And Elohim said, Let lights come to be in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and appointed times, and for days and for years. And let them be for lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth. And it came to be so. And Elohim made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. Here we see the word sign again. The word sign is the Hebrew word ot, Strong's number 226. Again, a distinguishing mark, a remembrance, a token, and proof. We will see this again later on in the teaching. Here's a word that most of you are probably familiar with, is the Hebrew word for seasons or appointed times is the Hebrew word moed, Strong's 4150. And it means, if you pay attention to the highlighted areas, it means meeting, sacred seasons, feast. These are the feast days in which Yahovah commanded to present ourselves before Yahovah. So his appointed times are his appointed feast. And that's what this word moed means. In Exodus 12 and 1 through 3, it states, And Yahovah spoke to Moshe and to Aaron in the land of Mitzrayim, saying, This month, Aviv, is the beginning of months for you. It is the first month of the year for you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, On the 10th day of this month, each one of them is to take for himself a lamb according to the house of his father, a lamb for a household. And the reason I use this scripture is to show the continuity, that the fact that Israel used the moon in reference to their counting of days. They did not reference to a pagan or a secular calendar. This is referring to the month of Aviv, which is the beginning of a new year and a new month. So why wouldn't it be the beginning of a new week? It is only in our Western Gentile thinking that we believe a week is totally independent of a month or a year. Here is one of my favorite scriptures in Psalms 104:19, and this is very powerful, which further solidifies the point I am making. Yahovah's Sabbath is a lunar Sabbath. It reads, He appointed the moon for seasons, the sun knoweth his going down. For the word seasons is the Hebrew word moed. Here we see that word again. And it means the set feast, appointed times. These are the feast of Yahovah. So what this is really saying, the moon tells us which day it is. The sun tells us the time of day. Once the sun sets, telling you that the day is over and a new day is starting, you look at the moon to tell you which day it is. Here's an interesting fact about the sundial. The Father showed me in a revelation that the clock, as we see the movement of the clock, it is to mimic the movement of the rising and the setting of the sun. And you will see this in the next few slides. Under sundial, which I just pulled off of Microsoft Encarta, which is an online encyclopedia you can get. It's pretty accessible. It states, Sundial, an instrument for measuring time by means of the location on a plane of the shadow cast by a marker exposed to sunlight. A sundial consists of two parts, a gnomon and a dial plane. The gnomon is a shadow-producing device, usually a metal plate set parallel to the Earth's axis and pointing toward the celestial pole. The dial plane is a flat surface marked with the times of day. A sundial is specially designed for its location on the Earth, and tables are used to calculate standard time from solar time, because solar time changes daily with the position of the sun. Sundials were used for judging time before clocks and watches became more available in the 18th century. So this tells you that if clocks and watches were produced or made available in the 18th century, what were the people of Yahovah using before then? They were using sundials to tell you what time of day it was, and they were using the moon to tell you what day it was. Let's continue. Here you see a picture that I pulled from the same source of a sundial. A sundial indicates the time by using a protruding marker called gnomon to cast a shadow. The angle of the shadow changes position as the sun passes from east to west during the course of the day. In the next slide, you're going to see how that'll be more clear. You'll see a visual of it passing from east to west. Markers on the dial are used to measure the angle of the shadow and tell the time. This is a very interesting diagram that I just created from scratch, but it's to mimic the movement of the clock in accordance to the sun. If you pay attention, the little man I have standing here, he is north facing south, if that makes sense. So to his left, the sun will be rising, which will be east, and will be setting to his right, which will be west. So if you look at the clock at 6 o'clock a.m., the sun is rising. And if you notice, the sun is kind of small around 6 a.m. and you see it rising. So as it gets to 9 o'clock, it gets bigger, and 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and at noon. So if you pay attention, even if you go outside at any time throughout the day, you'll notice around 12 o'clock, the sun is sitting straight above your head or straight above your houses. Then it starts descending, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, it starts going down towards setting behind the mountains or behind the horizon. So around 5 o'clock, the sun is setting. Now, if you, I have it written here, usually the sun rises between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m., depending on season and location. Now, if you notice the sunset, usually between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m., depending on season and location as well. Usually in the wintertime, the sun will set earlier. So between 4 and 5 o'clock, you would see the sun setting. Now for us in Arizona, we live, my wife and children and I live in Arizona. We have more daylight in the summertime. So the sun will usually start rising between 4 and 4:30. You'll see it coming over the horizon of the mountains, and it'll start setting between 7 and 8 o'clock. So we have quite a bit of daylight out here in Mountain Standard Time. People of Jehovah, there is absolutely no way to look at the sun to determine what day it is. The people who have advised you of such is sadly mistaken, and you are being led astray. You cannot look at the sun and tell what day it is. You can tell what time of day, but you cannot tell the day. Again, he appointed the moon for seasons. The sun knoweth his going down. Now the scripture makes much more sense and it's more real. He made the moon, he appointed the moon for its sole purpose of telling you the seasons of his days. You'll know which day of the month it is. And the sun knows it's going down. The sun has a purpose of rising and setting to tell you what time of day it is. And David makes that very clear in Psalms 104:19. You cannot get any clearer than this. If you notice, the moon is the only celestial body that appears to move in phases. The reason why I said appear is due to the fact that the moon itself rotates around the earth even as the earth rotates, as they both receive their light from the sun. If you look at this diagram, the sun is giving its light to the moon and to the earth. So depending on the rotation of the earth and the rotation of the moon around the earth, that will give you the phases of the moon. Just as we just finished reading in Psalms, where David stated the moon was made for appointed times, we're going to see the definition of what the appointed times of Jehovah are. In Leviticus 23 and 1 through 3, it states, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them concerning the feast of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my feast." So he's indicating that he's about to list what his feasts are. Immediately, the first thing he mentions, 6 days shall work be done, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of rest and holy convocation. You shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. Here the word feast is the same Hebrew word moed, Strong's number 4150, as in Genesis 1:24 and Psalms 104:19. Ask yourself this: the seventh day from what? People of Yehovah, again, do not be led astray. Every form of counting needs a starting point that can be referenced at any given time. You cannot have a perpetual counting from day one when earth was created. There is no way for people to really keep up with that, especially with the loss of calendars, the changing of cultures, the children of Israel being dispersed. Yehovah is not that cruel or that senseless, or not even having he's not unintelligent to where he doesn't have not a plan in which you can count. So it doesn't make sense to not have a form of counting. Every form of counting needs a starting point that can be referenced at any given time. Keep that in mind.